The Ice Age was to cut these first Europeans off, eliminating any contact with the rest of the world. In isolation, they developed distinctive traits. Their hair color changed, the shape of their noses changed, even their height. Today, people with European ancestors, like me and these French bull players, look pretty different from our distant relatives. But why had it taken our ancestors so long to arrive here? Whatever kind of journey they made, it's clear that they developed a whole new range of life skills along the way. So why did it take my ancestors 10,000 years to get to Europe from the Middle East? And why had they changed so much? The accepted theory was that they made their way around the Mediterranean and up through Turkey. Then, our research threw a wrench in the works.
Until relatively recently, we had no reason to doubt that the first Europeans had followed a direct route out of the Middle East. And then, quite by chance, we uncovered evidence that they'd come from somewhere else entirely.
Turns out, when they left the Middle East, my European ancestors went on a tough and grueling detour. I'm going to pick up their genetic trail in a faraway land that begins long after these rail tracks have run out. As the sampling of the world's populations mounted, I tackled one of the greatest genetic blind spots of the world. Since childhood, I've been fascinated by characters from along the Silk Road, traders and travelers like Marco Polo, and conquerors like Genghis Khan. I traveled to the ex-Soviet republics of Central Asia, little-known parts of the world, to sample the blood of their descendants.
We're in Bishkek, the capital of the former Soviet Republic of Kyrgyzstan. I first came here in 1996, and you really had the feel that you were coming to a very remote place. You know, some of the villages that we visited in Kyrgyzstan, we were the first foreigners that they'd seen since, 200, 300 years ago, perhaps.
When I first came here, this was new ground, untrammeled by any other Western scientist before me. For nearly a century, it was closed off behind the Iron Curtain. Even today, it's one of the most remote parts of the world. In this isolated land, I collected the blood of over 2,000 people. That was when we discovered that their blood held a remarkable secret, an ancient marker. I recognized it immediately. Nearly every man in Western Europe was carrying it, from Norway to Spain, Ireland to Austria. So my European ancestors hadn't taken the obvious route from Africa via the Middle East. Instead, they had passed through Central Asia 40,000 years ago. That was why they had taken so long to reach my homeland. But why would they do that? How did my ancient family from the Middle East wind up here, in this wilderness? William Calvin thinks that yet again the weather played a critical role.
Worldwide, you're getting droughts, you're getting forest fires, but the next year you're getting a lot of grass and a lot of grazing animals. And that's opportunity for the humans that survive the crash.
And for opportunity, read food. Honing their hunting skills and adapting to the colder temperatures, these African hunters followed the grasslands into modern-day Kazakhstan. The discovery of the Central Asian marker had changed our understanding of the journey made by the first Europeans. But was Europe the only destination for these formidable Central Asian hunters? Did their journey take them anywhere else? We widened our search and were in for an even bigger surprise. The markers seemed to be everywhere we looked. From Europe, through Asia, Russia, North and South America, the list seemed to be endless. We'd uncovered an astounding secret. If Africa was the cradle of mankind, then Central Asia was its nursery.
A bizarre sea of faces. And you can tell so much from a face. Or can you? Where are we now? We could be anywhere across the continent of Eurasia. But in fact, we're right at the very heart of it, in Central Asia. China is a few miles in that direction. Afghanistan a few hundred miles to the south. This is really the crossing point, the central part of the continent of Eurasia.
And I've come back for a very special reason. Hidden in the samples of those 2,000 Central Asians was one extraordinary individual. His name is Niyazov, and he's directly descended from the man whose DNA, 40,000 years ago, had a tiny spelling mistake, the Central Asian marker. This genetic marker has spread throughout the Northern Hemisphere and been inherited by over 1 billion people. Branches of Niyazov's ancestors went on to people Europe, parts of India, Russia, and America, but Niyazov's family has always stayed here. Analyzing his DNA for the first time was an extraordinary moment. In an instant, I knew we'd discovered something very important. Now we're going to meet him. After nearly 2,000 generations, Niyazov still lives in Central Asia. I'm excited about meeting him again, now that I fully understand the history he holds in his blood. But with a war raging less than 200 miles away in Afghanistan, making it across the border could be a little dicey. About half a mile from the border post now.
Hoping that we'll be able to get through all right. It's a bit touch and go. We've heard that Kazakhstan has locked down its borders because of the situation in Afghanistan. Possible refugees, possible Islamic militants. Everything's a bit touchy right now. About 500 meters from the post now. We also know that you're not supposed to film or take pictures at these border posts, so hopefully they won't notice us doing that. Down all the passport numbers. It's a very interesting mind.
They might not even let me through, and I may not get to see the man whose blood has unlocked the secrets of the greatest journey ever.
Yeah, he's eyeballed me.
How am I going to get out of this one? I'm on the track of one man whose blood tells the story of the most extraordinary journey in history. The children of this man's great ancestor became Native Americans, Europeans, Asians, and Russians. Some even made it down into India. But I'm being held at a border near a war zone. After 4 hours of bargaining, we were allowed into Kazakhstan. We're on our way.
We left eastern Kyrgyzstan at about 9 o'clock this morning, and it's 9 o'clock at night now. But very, very excited. We're about to go in and meet somebody who plays a critical role in our understanding of the genetic history of Eurasia. He gives us a direct line back to the ancestors of most Europeans, Native Americans, and a lot of Indians. So let's go see him. Niyazov? Здравствуйте. Очень приятно. С вами тоже очень приятно. Should take the shoes off.
Пожалуйста, пожалуйста, давай так. Проходи ты.
This is an extraordinary moment. You can make discoveries in a lab, but to put a face to a genetic marker as ancient as this, well, for me, it's truly amazing. He may be shorter than I am, but he's a genetic giant in our history. I'm gonna have to give him my blood speech, though. Hope it doesn't put him off.
What if I told you that your blood takes us back in history 40,000 years? Your lineage takes us back to the very first Central Asians, before Uighurs, before Pamirs, before Tajiks, the very first people who lived here. Do you know what DNA is?
Вы знаете ДНК? He have heard.
So it's the blueprint. That it's your instruction book. It's how to make another version
ДНК
of you.
дает вашим детям.
Now, the thing that we've been studying is known as the Y chromosome. And this is a small piece of DNA that doesn't really do very much except to make you male. So your Y chromosome you got from your father.
Чтоб чистый.
То есть вы
Чистый.
Да. Вот мой отец.
Pure.
This is a picture of his father.
Вот отец.
В центре, да?
А это дедушка.
And a grandfather.
Дедушка.
That's great.
Father and grandfather.
That's fantastic. So that is a lineage, okay? Your Y chromosome came from him, to him, to you. Now, if we trace back even further, so we go from you to your father, to your grandfather, to his father, and so on and so on and so on, back through nearly 2,000 generations. If we do that, we reach a single man, one man.
То есть, когда мы это делаем, то есть вы, допустим, один человек, берем как человек,
Who was living in southern Central Asia.
Который живет в центре Средней Азии, то есть Евразии, в центре континента. Мы живем, да?
Да, Средняя Азия.
Сердце.
Around 40,000 years ago. Now, this was a very important man. Because he is the ancestor of Europeans, Native Americans, and many Indians. So I can tell you with absolute certainty
Я могу вам точно сказать, с полной уверенностью.
Your Y chromosome and his Y chromosome and his Y chromosome, they've been here for 40,000 years.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Мой кровь, значит, чистый.
That means my blood is pure.
So congratulations.
Поздравляю.
Very interesting blood. It's absolutely fantastic to be able to do the work I do. I'm very lucky.
Я очень счастлив. Это просто фантастически то, что я делаю и что я нашел.
Every day is like solving a puzzle. I go into the laboratory and I get a result, and it solves a mystery about history.
То есть каждый день у меня как бы решаю какие-то загадки. Я прихожу в лабораторию, начинаю что-то делать и получаю абсолютно уникальные результаты. То есть каждый день как бы загадки, каждый день.
Спасибо.
But the most amazing part is to be able to come back here and tell you the results that I found from your blood.
Я счастлив то, что я после того, как получив результаты, я смог приехать опять сюда и сказать вам об этом.
Спасибо.
So I'd like to thank you for giving me both intellectual pleasure and real friendship and enjoyment.
Я хотела бы сказать вам спасибо за то, что вы мне дали просто интеллектуальное удовольствие, то, что я ученый, получил такой результат, я очень рад. И пожелать вам здоровья и счастья.
Спасибо.
So to your very important blood, which has brought us together.
Что мы стали друзьями, и что у вас очень важная кровь.
Чтобы приехать чаще. Снимали штуку. Я вам благодарен, что вы издалека пришли.
I'm very thankful that you came from the far.
Большое спасибо.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for meeting with us.
Я так боялся, что они меня делают.
Turned out the poor guy thought a doctor was coming to tell him he had cancer. No wonder he looks relieved. Genetically, we're so close. Yet from here in Central Asia, the descendants of Niyazov's ancestral grandfather ventured out to give us an incredible diversity of looks. One group traveled west along the plains of Asia to become the first Europeans. But one branch of Niyazov's family reached the Americas. Their children are the Native Americans, from the Inuit to the Incas. To get there, they had to embark on a journey into climatic extremes beyond anything endured before. Remember the Ice Age? Well, 20,000 years ago, it was at its most extreme. And yet, our research shows that that's when they headed straight into its bitter heart. Some of them are still there. Niyazov's ancient marker shows up in a nomadic tribe deep in the Russian Arctic. They're called the Chukchi, and they're survivors from the Great Migration to the Americas 15,000 years ago. The Chukchi aren't exactly easy to find. They live on the northeastern end of Russia. In order to get there, I've had to come to Moscow. It's the middle of winter, and this is the only place to get a flight that goes anywhere close. Finding this tribe isn't going to be easy, because they're nomads. I'm hoping the Chukchi can show me how those Central Asian hunters could survive a journey through the heart of an ice age. But this flight is only the start of my journey.
We've flown east from Moscow about 5,000 miles, and this is it, the end of the line. A place called Reindeer, an old Russian settlement. We're headed inland to see the Chukchi people. Don't know how we're going to get there, though. Could get quite interesting.
The Chukchi live a further 400 miles north, inside the Arctic Circle, where temperatures can drop to nearly 100 below. For me, the only way to get any nearer is by chopper, but I'm told the weather up there has turned to storm force, and all the aircraft are grounded. It's a wonder people can live here today. It's so cold they've got to build everything on stilts, protecting buildings from the permafrost. I'm put up in a bare 5th-floor apartment in town. How long I'll be here is anyone's guess. The Chukchi are as close as I can get to the first Arctic travelers. I'm desperate to see how they live here. They don't even have heating or electricity. But if the weather doesn't improve, I may never find out. I've been here 5 days now. I really couldn't have come at a worse time of year. I've been given all this Arctic clothing so I won't freeze. The coldest I've ever been is the freezer back in the lab, a balmy 20 below. Eventually, I get the call I've been waiting for. There's a gap in the weather, and we're going for it. This may not be mission impossible, but it sure feels like it. I don't really know the risks involved in the next leg of the journey. Somehow I suspect I don't want to. How can anyone live down there? It's strange, but being truly alone is exhilarating.
Absolutely unbelievable. Just incredible. It is amazing here. It's like being on the moon. Incredible flight. One of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Gorgeous. Really gorgeous.
The next leg is a bus ride to a town called Amguema, 120 miles inside the Arctic Circle. The air is even colder, but at least they have houses.
It's about 5 o'clock in the morning. Temperature is minus 25 degrees. We spent the night here in Amguema village. Now we're headed up to the tundra. It's about a 6-hour trip in one of these, an ex-Soviet tank. Gotta find out which one I'm going in first, though. Back here, the gear. We'll need that.
My guide hasn't arrived yet, so we're heading off without him. I've been told he'll meet us later, nearer the Chukchi camp.
Here we go. The bus uptown. See you in the tundra. We're heading up into the tundra to meet the people who are the direct descendants of the people who populated the Americas 15,000 years ago, at the height of an ice age. And the fact that I get to tell this incredible story and actually go on the journey that the genes have shown us, it's just amazing. This place is absolutely beautiful, and it's like being on another planet.
I know we can get to their general area on our own, but the Chukchi are nomads and will never find their exact location without our guide. I really hope he shows. At last he appears, and I'm about to get another lesson in human endurance. It turns out he's been walking for the last 6 days and nights to meet me.
Vladimir, you're from this village, Donkarem.
Да, я с побережья, коренной.
Yes, I am from coastal Chukotka.
And you walked.
Yeah.
So from Amgoema, we head west up the Amgoema River, maybe 100 kilometers until we find them.
Да, окей, да, все правильно.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, fantastic.
I sense I'm going to have to cut down on handshaking. I'm too fond of my fingers. They look so pleased to see us. Or maybe it's just curiosity. I can't imagine they get many visitors. Uh-oh. I can feel another frozen handshake coming on. Time to show off a bit of my high school Russian.
Меня зовут Spencer. Victor.
They spend their lives in temperatures that are now paralyzing me. Looking around here, I'm struggling to comprehend it all. We may be brothers under the skin, but they're obviously different. Somehow, they're better able to cope with the cold. And Nina Jablonski knows why.
The Chukchis are a classic example of what has been referred to in human biology as Bergmann's and Allen's rules. That is, in a very cold climate, the surface area of the body will be reduced and the length of the appendages will be reduced. So the people tend to have shorter arms and legs, shorter fingers, and a shorter and rounder trunk to reduce the surface area through which heat can be lost. In that way, they're wonderful furnaces, as it were, for preserving their own body heat.
And to maintain this body heat, the Chukchi have to stay physically active. For Victor, this means hard work, all day, every day. He looks after his herd of over 1,000 reindeer. I soon learned that the Chukchi are utterly dependent on them. Their ancestors hunted them, but found that life would be easier if they tamed them. Now reindeer are the Chukchi life support system. But how do these high-energy and all-providing creatures manage to survive in this frozen desert? No vegetables, no greens of any kind. The answer lies beneath the snow, in the most precious resource in the tundra, lichen. The reindeer dig down to find it. This tiny plant fueled the greatest journey ever, from Central Asia to the New World.
We're 200 kilometers inside the Arctic Circle, eastern Siberia, mid-November, little after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The sun has already gone down. Temperature's about minus 40 Celsius, and it's dropping at a rate of about a degree every 10 minutes, so it's going to get very, very cold tonight. One of the things you don't really think about when you imagine cold on this scale is that all of the moisture, all of the liquid is tied up in this, snow and ice. It's as though liquid water did not exist, almost like a parallel universe. And that's what life was like about 40,000 years ago as we were going into the depths of the last ice age.
And by 20,000 years ago, the world had hit rock bottom, as cold as it could get. Yet the Chukchi's ancestors survived.
Ah, this is a Yarunga.
An important lesson in Chukchi survival. Eat and drink all the time. I'm starving. So, what's on the menu?
This is reindeer. Excellent.
Do you want?
I would love some, yeah.
The Chukchi diet is almost entirely based on reindeer. They use every part of the animal for sustenance. At these temperatures, nothing gets wasted. I've never eaten reindeer meat. It tastes really good. Bit like beef, but richer and higher in protein.
Yeah, don't eat from knife because it's cold and your tongue can...
Stick to the knife. Okay, so you eat with your fingers. Important to learn these things.
After supper, I'm off to bed.
We're inside the local Chukchi dwelling, known as a yaranga, made out of reindeer skin and wooden poles. It's freezing in here. Ice covering the inside. It's about minus 30 Celsius outside. Can't be that much warmer in here. And this is where I'm sleeping for the night, inside one of these, which is sort of a tent within a tent, again made out of reindeer skin and wooden poles.
I can see that Elvis's decorator has been here.
Fantastic. It's like a reindeer in here. They've told me you just sleep in here, no sleeping bag, no blankets, just the candles and body heat to keep you warm. So, time for bed.
Believe it or not, as temperatures plummeted to 60 below outside, the yaranga's inner sanctum kept me warm as toast.
It's so cold out here. No gloves.
Despite thousands of years of adaptation, the climate is so harsh that few Chukchi stay here to endure it.
How many people live in your group?
В нашем стойбище сейчас зимой 9 человек.
9 people in the... So the size of the group is quite small.
Во всем предприятии в оленевских бригадах у нас 6 бригад всего. И в бригадах вот такие вот по столько человек.
So in Amgoyama Tundra, there are only 6 brigades like here.
And is that because life is so difficult here?
Да.
Yes, you're right.
Now why are you repairing this now? It's like a sled of some sort. You're moving. How often do you have to move?
Они всегда двигаются.
Always. And it's always dictated by what the reindeer need.
Да.
Yes, you're right.
The Chukchi's ancestors had followed the reindeer eastwards. After thousands of years, they ended up here, at the eastern tip of Russia. But they couldn't go any further, and were forced to make this inhospitable corner of the world their home.
The ebb and flow of Chukchi life is determined entirely by the reindeer that they herd. the things they eat, the clothes they wear, even the dwellings they live in, they all come from the reindeer. And this time of year, life is getting pretty difficult, so the herd needs to move on so that it can scrape subsistence out of the snow-covered ground here. What we're seeing right now is the village packing up to move on after the herd, herding the reindeer together and pulling a few of them off so that they can drag the sledges with the tents.
Victor and his family are moving off, following their reindeer to new pastures, living proof that humans can adapt and survive in these extremes, and a lesson in just how little we really need to get by. But there's more. My genetic trail tells me that around 15,000 years ago, a tiny group of these Chukchi's ancestors survived to make an impossible leap into the New World. A journey which began with Niyazov's family in Central Asia, then moved east along the length of Russia, left the ancestors of these incredibly tough Chukchi poised to conquer a new continent. But there was a seemingly impassable barrier to their route. The frozen reaches of the Bering Sea separate Russia from the Americas.
We're here at the Bering Strait, and it is unbelievably cold here. Clogged with ice for about 6 months of the year. Not even an icebreaker can get through. And yet we know that the ancestors of the Native Americans made it through here about 15,000 years ago at the height of the last ice age. How could they have made a trip like that?
I followed the trail of the first humans from Africa to the eastern tip of Russia. I've met their descendants, the Chukchi. But blocked from reaching America by the Bering Sea, I can go no further. Yet I know the blood of these Arctic herdsmen connects them to Native Americans. How did they get there? In an ironic twist, the ice age that drove us out of Africa now provided the Chukchi's ancestors with an escape route. As temperatures fell and sea levels dropped, a new landmass called Beringia was exposed from beneath the Bering Sea. This new land connected the Russian Far East to Alaska. The reindeer headed for new pastures. The few survivors followed them, taking mankind into uncharted territory, into the New World.
The sea level was very much lower. About, you could build a 40-story building, to tell you how much the sea level had changed. But they couldn't go very far. They were sort of stuck in northern Alaska because of all the ice.
And behind them, things weren't much better. As the Ice Age came to an end, sea levels rose again, marooning the first Americans on a tiny pocket of land. Yet they survived. An escape route appeared.
The first Americans arrived here only about 13,000 years ago, and they probably walked from Alaska down a corridor that existed certainly by 11,000 years ago along the eastern side of the Rocky Mountains. There may have still been ice to the east and the west, but there was an ice-free corridor that they could have walked down, and they arrived in North America. It was essentially an empty environment from their perspective with lots of rich resources.
A journey that had begun in Africa divided in Central Asia, had now reached the last continent. For thousands of years, they had endured the most extreme conditions on Earth, and now this branch of mankind had found a new home.
Our ancestors were pretty tough people. They'd survived drought, famine, and an ice age in order to get this far. Yet our genetic results tell us that the first group to make it through to the Americas had been whittled down to as few as 10 or 20 individuals. Today, their descendants are carrying, written in their DNA, evidence of those hardships thousands of years ago. But when they did get through, what was their reward? A land of plenty. They'd never had it so good.
After 10,000 years of struggling through the tundra, these Arctic hunters hit the jackpot. As the ice gave way to the rolling prairies, they found a new land in which to live and prosper. Their numbers swelled, and in only 800 years they had peopled both North and South America.
I'm off to meet an ancient tribe who traced their family line back to Siberia, to the ancestors of the Chukchi who made that first migration into the Americas. They're the Navajo, and they live here in Canyon de Chelly, Arizona.
The Navajo Indians have been living in North America ever since their Chukchi ancestors first arrived. Canyon de Chelly is one of their most sacred sites. I wanted to tell them about the genetic trail that had led me to them. But I soon learned they had migration stories of their own.
Fleming and Letty, thanks a lot for inviting me up here to your place.
You're welcome. Enjoy having you.
It's gorgeous here.
We're glad to share the information about our place here.
Can you tell me a little bit about the place, how long you've lived here?
This is the junction of Canyon de Chelly. We got this piece of land from my great-grandfather.
This is our hogan.
We have a story of where we came from, and our story, our origin, is a very sacred stories, and it's passed on through generations, and that's your life and your way of where you came from. And I'm sure that these two has some other information too.
Phil Bluehouse explained.
Well, adding to what Letty has to say, there is a creation and journey narrative that we go back to, and this narrative is quite sacred. It talks about the event of creation. We call that a hajine in Navajo, or at the time of beginning.
Do you have any stories about where the ancestors, the ancestors of everyone may have come from?
It depends on how you... There are discussions about migrations. I mean, when we migrate from our mother onto the Earth's surface, that is a migration narrative. I mean, we come from one being to another. That's a migration. If we believe that we were created here in the Four Sacred Mountain area, this is where we came up from the ground. In other words, we were birthed into this place, just like we are all birthed by our mother.
I also have my own sense of what that story might be using science. I'm a geneticist. And everybody around the world is very closely related to each other. We're all part of one big family. In fact, we're all related to people who lived in Africa as recently as 50,000 years ago. That's only about 2,000 generations. So you have distant relatives living all over the world who are essentially African. And you yourselves are essentially African. So am I. Can I show you some pictures of some of the people we've met?
Yep.
These are people known as the San Bushmen who live in southern Africa. And they are some of the oldest people on the planet.
Are these the people that have that clicking sound?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, exactly. Fascinating people. Now, the evidence is that the first people who left Africa followed a coastal migration route along the south coast of Asia, and they ended up in Australia. The Australian Aborigines. We visited them.
So you're basing this on the genetic trail?
Exactly.
Now, these people who were in Australia, they mainly were more together as a group, you know, like
more cohesive.
More cohesive, and
there are lots of different populations in Australia, speaking very different languages. They have different cultures, different myths.
Why do you call something that a people will tell you a myth, as opposed to an experience that they had and they relive it over and over, rather than calling it a myth? Would be able to call it something else, because I have a real strong feeling about that. That, you know, if you call something a myth, it's a substandard event that does not have any relevance, because they are real as we understand them. They're not myths. And
Absolutely, that's a very good point. And my bias as a scientist is that I like to see evidence for things.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was the first migration out of Africa, according to the genetic results that we have. Now the next one followed a slightly different route, one that went inland.
I'm getting pretty good at this. Of course, it helps that I brought the family album along.
And this man is a direct descendant of a person who lived in Central Asia about 35 to 40,000 years ago.
Wow.
And his ancestor is also the ancestor of most Europeans and Native Americans.
Wow.
He's a man called Niyazov, who lives in Kazakhstan.
Are you the same person that did some research I noticed on the internet that says that the Native American people are somehow connected to Central Europe?
Yes, Central Asia.
Central Asia.
Yeah, that was a paper that we published last year.
Okay. That's good to know.
What do you think of that?
I you know, and I was looking at a book from people from Central Asia, and I saw my cousin Emmett and Abraham, Auntie Grandma Buggy, and I said, my God, I got family over there in Central Asia. These were the Mongolian people.
Yeah.
Central Asians.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's it right there. In the eye, he looks like Oriental, and then he's got Negro features to some extent, and also Caucasian, kind of all mixed together. That's interesting, very interesting.
These are the Chukchi people, and they're your distant cousins. They're still living in northeastern Siberia. I visited them recently.
Oh, they're the ones that have
with the reindeer.
With the reindeer.
Reindeer. I've seen them on TV.
Their home is...
Yeah, the home looks like a teepee. And the results show that they are your ancestors. They ultimately made that trip across the Bering Strait into the Americas.
Wow.
About how tall were these guys here?
About 5'8", 5'6", 5'8". Yeah, not too tall. Yeah. And by looking at the genetic data, we can estimate that as few as 10 or possibly 20 people were in that first group, the first wave of migration into the Americas.
Yeah.
My story about the journey of man came as no surprise to these Navajo. The idea of migration had been central to their own creation story since the beginning of time.
The point is that somehow we're finally acknowledging one another from the scientific realm and from the traditional realm, saying that, yeah, the puzzle is starting to fit together.
And we complement each other.
And we're all complementing each other.